Hi guys, I'm here with David Birtwistle today and we're going to be chatting over some things about nutrition and work in general. David, introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, for sure. So David Birtwistle, aka DB, I am the founder of Endeavour Life, and I suppose like as a person, my goal is to try and make the absolute most out of life, not just through work, but in relationships, travel, experiences, and financially. I kind of feel like you can have it all as long as you work really, really hard, but you also start life from a blank piece of paper. So you're not trying to like follow in anyone else's footsteps, but creating a life for yourself, which is personal. That's kind of my theory.
So tell us a bit about what got you into fitness in the first place.
Well, it started back when I was about 15, right? So I was playing rugby, really enjoying rugby, and somehow managed to get into England under 16s, right? That was like a huge moment in my life. I remember it like perfectly, getting the letter in my mum's living room and like just in awe. And so just before that happened, there was a teacher at my school who was a science teacher, and he saw a bit of potential and was like, David, you need to get into the gym. So I started training with him in preparation for that, got into England, got scouted by Wasps,
wow,
pulled into Wasps Academy, and then was training basically like a professional rugby player. So like 5 days a week in the gym, on the pitch, just like all with the goal of going pro. However, classic sports story, got ACL rupture, so I had to have a knee reconstruction at 17.
Oh.
Didn't go pro, very sad times. Then, as a result of that though, I'd kind of like bought into the whole idea about human performance, and like I've seen the benefits of it personally and rehabbed my knee and everything back to full kind of health. So I went to university and did a degree in strength and conditioning, which is very much like human performance and elite athlete development and stuff like that. So that was where it went initially, to get the kind of formal education. After that, I thought, well, I can either be an S&C coach or work in kind of with regular people, non-athletes, yeah? So I was like, I'll do that. I think there's a bit more potential there. And it all started running boot camps on Chiswick Common for £2 a session. That was like the first time we ran this Groupon discount.
Really?
And it was like £2 per person. And we got, I can't remember, it was like 50 people or something to this boot camp, and it was huge, and it all started off like that really. And just over time, kind of going from running boot camps in the rain, in the park, in the dark, in the cold, in winter for £2 per person, to then doing a lot more kind of private PT in people's homes, and then kind of seeing that actually the longevity may be in working online rather than working in person. So kind of 5 years ago, started doing online coaching, kind of way before it was quite a mainstream thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like really new into the industry, this concept of online coaching, but personal online coaching. I did that for a few years and then realized I don't want to be I don't want to be doing everything all the time forever. The longevity is in making a company that stands by itself,
yeah,
and that's known for something that's not just you. And in order to create that, I needed to bring in the right people, and thus formed Endeavour Life. So that's the story.
That's a great story. So can you explain a bit more about what online coaching is and how it might differ from in-person coaching?
Absolutely. So traditional in-person PT is you pay for an hour of a coach's time, and in that hour they'll take you through a session. Obviously they'll be able to correct your form, kind of make sure that the session itself goes well. Hopefully they are kind of planning each session so it is as periodized and progressive as possible. But essentially you're getting time for money. As a coach and as a client, you're paying money for their time. Now, the way that it differs from online coaching is that because you're not exchanging time for money, you're paying for a service. That service can be a lot more well-rounded, and you can actually create a lot more content and valuable information to give to the client to allow them to kind of lead themselves through that journey. So essentially online coaching, personal online coaching, becomes more self-led, a little bit more accountable for the client, and also provides them with a much more holistic, well-rounded experience. So the way I like to see it is that for the same money or significantly less, depending on where you get your PT, personal online coaching actually provides a much more holistic approach, so that the client can learn about training, they can learn about nutrition, they can learn about mindset, whatever they want, that's going to help them go through their journey and kind of come out the other side a more empowered individual.
Amazing. Now, have you found that in-person coaching is slightly better or worse than online coaching?
They each have their merits. So if you're in person with someone, you can correct their form to the nth degree. You can really like tap into their emotional state during that session. Like, you can apply as much detail within that hour as possible to allow that client to develop as much as possible. However, what someone does for the rest of their week, it's kind of up to them.
Yeah.
And so if someone's looking for an aesthetic change, or if they're looking for a sports performance change, what someone does outside of the 1 hour in the gym actually is significantly more important than just that 1 hour in the gym. Because if you're not fueling yourself properly, if you're not sleeping properly, if you're not recovering properly, then the results from that gym session are going to be significantly reduced. Yeah. So it's not necessarily that one's better than the other, it's more so that if you're a client that needs a lot of attention in a session, then probably face-to-face coaching is going to be the one for you. Okay. But if you're someone that's maybe a little bit more self-led, that maybe needs a bit more of a lifestyle accountability tool, someone that wants to understand about nutrition, but also be able to learn for themselves about how to move properly through video demonstrations or tutorials, and kind of learn a bit more intrinsically rather than someone having to coach you in the moment, then online coaching is a little bit more beneficial. I personally feel like you probably get more value for money with online coaching because you're not exchanging time for money.
Sure, yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you. So what's the Endeavour ethos or approach when it comes to training and managing clients?
So we've got 3 core pillars that we really champion. So food, movement and mindset. Each of them plays a really important role in a client's long-term development. With fitness specifically, we champion strength building as the foundation from which everything can grow from. So functional strength training is generally how we coach people, because we don't want to just be super strong but unable to move properly. So we're looking at mobility, flexibility, control, stability, if I didn't already say that, and strength kind of flows around that. So it's not just about going in and being super strong on a bench press if you can't really control your core, or if you're not very stable on one leg. Most people, they want to be strong, but they want to be able to like do stuff in life. Yeah. Right? And so easing up joints and providing more freedom of movement is really, really important to that specific process. I feel like a lot of people also want to be pain-free. So looking a bit more long-term and not just short-term allows us to actually focus on achieving short-term results with clients. It might be aesthetic goals like fat loss or building muscle, but also preventing injury for the long term and reducing pain by ensuring proper training technique through video analysis and other tools. So that's kind of one of the core pillars, but we also know that food is essential, right? We have to eat food every day. I'm talking to you, you're working at Fresh Fitness Food. We know how important that is. And for us, that is like such a core value, because like I said earlier, if someone's training for an hour or 2 hours in the gym, it's going to not really have the same impact if they're not fueling themselves correctly, right? Yeah. So educating people about how to eat for the goals that they have and for their long-term sustainable nutritional approach is essential too, because so many people struggle with weight gain once they've lost weight, because they don't learn how to eat for themselves so that it becomes intuitive, right? Like the goal for us is that everyone gets to the body that they want, and then they learn how to eat intuitively for the long term. So that would be food. And then mindset, well, I mean, your mindset governs everything, right? And it flows into how you eat, it flows into how you train, it flows into your decision-making ability, all of these things. So for us, that's another core pillar where we want to ensure that we differentiate ourselves away from other people that are doing online coaching by providing the tools necessary, the courses necessary, and the coaching available to allow people to really learn more about themselves, empower themselves, become more accountable to themselves, and therefore be able to go through life making better decisions along the journey, so it all just becomes easier and more free-flowing and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of our core values.
Nice, it really is the kind of holistic view that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always been my thought, like, why do we focus on one thing when we all kind of realise that each component kind of flows into each other, and that they're not isolated but interlinked.
Okay, so when a client's looking to fuel their body specifically for performance, what would be your top 3 recommendations?
Great question. So when it comes to performance, I personally feel that from a nutritional perspective, you need to have enough protein and enough complex carbohydrates. As we know, complex carbs are your fuel source, and for most elite athletes, they expend a lot of energy, so require a lot of carbohydrates. And for protein, well, muscle building, muscle recovery, making sure that you can actually perform by fueling the body properly. They're my first 2 things, but then as an elite athlete, you want to ensure that you're actually getting everything you can out of your performance, and that might mean supplementing specific supplements relevant to your sport. So that could be whey protein to help with recovery, it could be creatine to help with power, it could be beta-alanine to help with lactate buffering. Any of these things are really going to be beneficial if you are an elite athlete that's looking for that improved sport performance. However, if you are, say, a long distance runner or an ultra athlete, then obviously electrolytes are going to be massively important to help with that. So looking at the specific requirements of your sport and then supplementing accordingly is going to allow for much better sports performance. So they definitely be my top 3.
Nice. What do you believe are the main things that lead to success in the gym?
Well, in order to get success in the gym, you need to have a plan, a detailed plan. You need to be consistent with it, and you need to work hard. There are no shortcuts. I think with training, it's one of the most obvious examples where you actually can't make shortcuts to get the results that you want. But then I think that kind of flows, if you can use any real example, anything that you want in life, anything that really means something to you, anyone that you see as successful, they haven't taken shortcuts to achieve that success. Think about becoming the CEO of a company, or getting married, or graduating from university. All of these things, if they're worth having, take time, effort, potentially money to invest in, but then as a result you get something that you're really, really proud of. So I feel like the gym and getting results in your body is very similar to that.
Yeah, and kind of leading off of that, in your opinion, what are the most and least underrated exercises someone could do?
I think the most underrated is actually hip and ankle mobility.
Okay.
These are things which, when I was younger, no one really paid attention to. And as a stiff rugby player, I really struggled to get into like good squat positions, and just felt that it was normal not to be able to touch my toes. I was like, okay, it just is what it is, right? But actually, through spending more time doing more flexibility work, more mobility work, like my joints just become so much more supple. I feel like I can move freely, and it's like such a nice feeling to have, and actually improves your overall quality of life, not being super stiff. So definitely like ankle and hip mobility would be the most underrated things. When it comes to being overrated, HIIT.
Really?
HIIT classes are not the one. I mean, they can be a part of a training program, but I don't feel like HIIT and like lots of plyometrics should really be the core of what you do. Okay. It doesn't really allow for much progressive overload. Yeah. A lot of people find that they just get like battered in every workout, and it's just not really optimal if you're looking to lose fat or get fit or build muscle or get really many of the physiological adaptations to training that you'd want. Most people don't want to be able to bounce up and down loads. That's not, so you don't really, I don't get many people coming to me like, David, I really want to be able to just bounce up and down a lot. Most people are like, I want to get fit, I want to lose weight, I want to be healthy, I want to move freely, I want to be strong. HIIT classes just don't achieve any of those things.
No, that's a good point. I agree with the mobility though. I'm an ex-gymnast, so I've always been relatively flexible. I did it from kind of 6 to 19.
Oh wow.
So I have recently started CrossFit, and it's helped a lot.
Yes,
with that.
It helps so much.
A significant amount.
Yeah, because if you can get into a good position, not only does it mean that you can move more freely, but you can actually put your body under less stress. Yeah. You can load the spine more effectively, and you're not trying to force yourself into a position that your body doesn't want to go into. You can just like move.
Just do it. Yeah.
Very nice feeling.
It's great. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. So is it possible to lose fat and build muscle at the same time? And if so, what are your nutrition, lifestyle and training kind of protocols to approach that?
Great question. Loads of people want to do this. It would be great if this was the case. For some people, it is totally possible. So if you're a novice, if you're someone that's not really trained before, then it is possible for you to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. For most people who have been training for a while, it becomes pretty inefficient. They are kind of like opposing results. Yeah. Building muscle mass requires more energy, losing body fat requires less energy. So they're like the polar opposites of what your body really wants to do. But you can do it in a very specific situation. So if you put yourself in a very modest calorie deficit, maybe 5% or 10%, like quite a small deficit, ate a very high protein diet, lifted weights a lot, and did kind of low intensity cardio to kind of help with that calorie burn, then you could do it. Okay. But it's not really optimal, right? Because if you wanted to lose body fat, you get much faster results by putting yourself in a more aggressive deficit. You'd still follow a similar protocol of high protein diet, lifting weights, things like that, but you could go into like a 20 or 30% calorie deficit, lose body fat 2 to 3 times as fast. And if you wanted to build muscle mass, actually what you'd want to do is put yourself in a slight surplus to be able to give the body the fuel that it needs to build the muscle mass. So it would be better to do them separate if you can. Sure. Yeah. Typically, it's actually better to build muscle mass first, because then when you're trying to lose body fat, you can do more stuff, right? The more strong you are, the more fit you are, the easier it is to lose body fat. So you can, generally wouldn't recommend it though.
Sure. And I guess it depends on where you're starting from as well, right? So if you are overweight and wanting to lose fat, it's probably better to start there than to start with building muscle, I would imagine.
Yeah, it really does depend on what the individual is looking to achieve, because like if someone is very overweight, then it might make sense to put them into a calorie deficit first, but at the same time you'd be looking to try and make them stronger. Yeah. So the goal would not be to build muscle, it would be to lose fat, but you'd still be strength training them. Yeah. So they would still be getting physiological adaptations to that training, but losing fat much quicker, because actually the building of muscle mass would be less important to them. If someone was trying to do both at the same time, you'd already have to be relatively lean, otherwise it wouldn't really be noticeable. Okay. Because the changes would be quite small. Sure. So I think realistically, if someone's trying to go through a body recomposition, you'd probably need to be like 12 to 15% body fat for it to be worthwhile. If you're more than that, it would kind of be a bit pointless, because the results wouldn't be as fast as you want them. You might get a little bit demotivated. Sure. And that is one of the things that is a killer to someone's results. If they're not motivated, they're not going to be pushing that extra 5% in the gym, they're not going to be sticking to their diet as much, and results create more motivation. So yeah, it's all right for some, but not ideal for most.
No, that makes sense. So a similar kind of question, but slightly different take. So if you had 2 goals that you're wanting to improve, not necessarily losing fat and building muscle, but like getting stronger and being able to improve in your running, what would you recommend there?
Well, this is interesting. So when we look at physiological adaptations to training, you want to consider that if you have 2 goals, that they have relatively similar physiological adaptations, right? So if you wanted to get strong and run really fast, they're both power-based activities, right? So you're looking at high power output, high strength output activities, so you could do those concurrently. However, if you wanted to get really, really strong and also run really, really far, they're polar opposites in terms of physiological adaptations. So your muscle wants to do one or the other really, and it takes quite a long time to go from one end to the other end. So if you've been a runner for a long time, it takes a long time to build up that peak strength. And if you've been, say, a power lifter, it would take a long time to become really good at ultra distance running. So if someone wanted to achieve these things, you could train them concurrently, but because the signals to the body to adapt would be opposites, they'd kind of cause confusion, and therefore your results wouldn't be as quick. Okay. It's one of those things like when we look at CrossFit athletes, they're amazing at a lot of different stuff. and they have to be good at running quite far and cycling quite far, but also power and speed and things like that. They come from a foundation of strength and power. The majority of their sport is strength and power, but then they also have to do the other stuff as well. But their strength and power numbers are higher, closer, relatively speaking, to people who are absolute pros in that specific sport. So it could be like powerlifters or Olympic lifters. Obviously, we've got Tia Toomey, who has a background in Olympic weightlifting. However, you compare their, like a marathon time to an actual marathon runner, and the gap is quite large in comparison. So they're probably the most well-rounded athletes and have to kind of navigate this. But at the same time, if you're a regular individual, it would be smarter to focus on one thing, because you don't have 8 hours a day to commit to training. So typically it's best to like focus on one area and then focus on something else. Okay,
so similar kind of principle to losing fat and building muscle.
Exactly.
Focus on what you want more to start with.
Yeah, it makes sense. And typically to start with building muscle and getting strong as a foundation, because then you'll be more capable of doing things which will help the other stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of kind of fitness and general health. What's something that people might not know about you?
Okay, so this is like quite a personal thing. I thought it'd be good to like share a little bit of something. So I think I'm a little bit autistic. Like when I was a teenager, I really struggled to like sympathize with people, understand people and communicate with people properly. And like as Chrissy, who's the other co-founder of Endeavour, will admit, like I can be really direct when at work, and you know, if people don't kind of share the same sort of energy as me with trying to get stuff done, I kind of get a bit like impatient with them. Sure. And so when that happens, I'm like, Chrissy, can you take over this conversation, please? Because I'm getting really frustrated. This person's not on my level. I just need you to like use your much more softly spoken, well-rounded approach to solving this problem. So that is kind of one of the things which I recognise in certain situations can be quite beneficial, because in like high pressure environments, I'm able to just like deal with stuff and move past it. But actually when a situation requires a little bit more delicacy and finesse, that's not necessarily one of my strengths. And so that's one of those things that I think it's good to be able to understand about yourself. Yeah. Your greatest strength can also be your greatest weakness.
True, and I guess if you've got a co-founder that is there to balance it out, that's great.
Yeah, it really, really helps. Yeah. She's brilliant. It literally happened the other day, and I was like, I can't, Chrissy, I need you to take this conversation over.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good to be honest and open, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for the interview. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for coming in. It's been great chatting.
Cheers.